Hey there! Welcome to episode 52 of an ongoing series where we basically take the camera anywhere we want, and we try to find secrets and new discoveries to some of our favorite games. So you might be wondering, where the heck is Ethan's face? I don't know. Nah, I'm just kidding. In fact, I'll totally explain why he has no face and show it to you. So if you stick with me, you'll be all set. But with that said, let's get going. So the first thing that we're going to do is a zoom out of the house itself. Now this is the only time in the game where there's any sort of daylight out, so this is actually the best time to take a look at this environment, because after that it's all dark and murky. And what's really impressive is that the entire house is rendered fully. There isn't even any basic culling here. But off in the distance we can also see some objects that are way outside the player's eyesight. And what you'll find there is a really weird texture that I cannot pinpoint for the life of me. It kind of looks high-tech. What was really strange is that it's just plastered on this grassy ground. But if we move on from that, we can see this weird shaped dome. And at first I didn't know what this belonged to either, but as I went a little further into the game I could see it was used as an effect prop. It's used to give three-dimensional darkness when Ethan looks through the window from the outside. And then to the left of this dome is the information file that Ethan starts the game with, complete with a picture of himself and his wife. So in the opening cutscene we have Mia here, telling Ethan to stay away and all that jazz. And you might notice something a little interesting here. Her body movements match that of her head, which is on the computer screen, not on her actual shoulders. Now what's happening here is that you're at the perspective of the person that you're playing as. So naturally you don't want to see things like eyeballs, teeth, or skin textures getting in the way of your camera view. And so what the developers do for this and many other games is use something called culling on the face, or have no face whatsoever. But what the developers did for Resident Evil 7 was actually make the faces exist. However, they're using culling to make the heads invisible while you play. This is evidence here in this cutscene with Mia, as well as seeing Ethan's head in the shadows, which might give you the impression that we're out of luck as far as seeing Ethan's face. Well, you'd be wrong, because luckily enough the developers used Ethan as a prop or an event in the game itself. Now they still hid his face away from the player for whatever reason, but the good news is we can take the camera over to Ethan before any cutscene triggers. And what you're looking at here is Ethan's real face. And lucky for us they left his eyelids open so we can actually see his eyes. Although it's a little creepy, but what can you do? It's a horror game anyway, right? So how about it, viewer? Have you ever figured out where the title screen actually takes place? Well, I wouldn't blame me if you didn't, because they kind of rearrange a lot of stuff, but where you're actually in at this very moment is inside the trailer that's pretty infamous in Resident Evil 7. Now, the two major differences here is that in the game, the trailer is completely cluttered with newspapers and blankets and all sorts of knickknacks. However, in the title screen, either as a beta version or to save on load time, the trailer is completely gutted out, so much so that it could actually be a little difficult to make the comparison. So before we move on to inside the mansion, or whatever, I want to take another look at one of the pathways leading into the residence of evil. So as you can see here, it's very convincing. It's a very dense set of woods. However, when you take the camera through those woods, very quickly, the magic of illusion is gone. And what you can see here is a textured wall of forest. And if we were to take the camera further up into the sky, you can see that there's not much more beyond that as well. Although I gotta say, I'm very impressed with how well the game convinced me that there was so much more to see than what was shown to you. There are many little boundary breaky things here and there in Resident Evil 7. For example, there's a texture behind all the TV screens on all the TVs. And also if you look at this wall filled with profiles, you can see that the wall extends past the corner into the out of bounds, and there's even more profile pictures than the game intended to use. Okay, we're looking at the first VHS tape, and you might notice something a little bit odd about our main character Clancy here. So let's just clear the air and just talk about the elephant in the room here. Clancy's wearing a fanny pack. Who wears fanny packs? Whatever, Clancy. But you also might notice that there's a weird overlay in front of his not face. And the reason for this is because at this point in the game, you're actually viewing a VHS tape. And so for a VHS overlay, the developers put a film effect over your character's point of view. And so wherever you look in the game, this funny little overlay follows your face around. Something very similar to this was also used in BioShock when you went into the Big Daddy costume. It gave your character a little circle for a face to represent the Big Daddy's little fishbowl thing going on. You probably have no idea what I'm talking about. I'll leave a link to the BioShock episode in the video description. And since we're here, we obviously have to see where Andre goes when he walks away and falls into horror trope number 1. What are you doing, dude? But as you can see, if we take the camera over to see what Andre's doing in that moment, he just disappears once he's off camera. What you're going to find out is what happens to a lot of characters who happen to make a quick escape or a quick entrance in this game.
Although, this would make a great backdrop. Andre, what do you think? Andre?
So something I noticed, all the refrigerators in Resident Evil 7 don't allow you to open up the freezer door. But what's really cool is that every single freezer door in Resident Evil 7 has an interior to it. There's no objects inside of it, but the complete layout of an inside of a freezer is ever present in every single fridge, which I just thought would be interesting to show you. And you also may notice that Ethan is now inside the fridge with us. Don't question it. No, it's alright, you can question it. What happens here, which also happens in a lot of first-person shooters, is that the model that's holding the gun, and in this case the shirt and the arms holding the gun, are always the top layer no matter what while you're playing the game. So if we take the camera away from our character and point it into an object that's clearly well past Ethan, Ethan still has to show up on the top layer, so we'll see his shirt no matter what. Here is the most famous scene in the game, the dinner table, with the entire family. I'm doing the air quotes. But now we can see Daddy feed Ethan the food from another perspective, which of course without a head looks absolutely ridiculous. But what we're really looking at this scene for is that Mom leaves the area, and of course you can't leave your seat to go see where she leaves to. So we're gonna take the camera on the other side of the door and just see how far she goes before she disappears. And it's actually really interesting how often you see characters have a walk animation or a run animation after they're completely out of view. So as you know, early on in the game, the police officer comes rat-tap-a-tapping, trying to save the day. And much like every other character in the game, once he gets off screen, he disappears. But he brings something with him. Yep, the deputy brings his cruiser with him, which you're never given a great chance to look at. What's really cool about this police car is that the interior is completely different from any other car that you're actually able to look at in the game. For example, the stick shift here has that weird leather casing that you see in some more modern cars. In fact, it all has a chic leather interior. So now that we got some of the cooler stuff out of the way, what does it look like when you're looking at an object in the world of Resident Evil 7 from a different angle? Well, it's just like Ethan's shirt, where it has to be in the front layer. So no matter which way we turn the camera around, you will always see the object that Ethan's holding and inspecting. So here's a pretty interesting find. When you do the silhouette puzzles for any part of Resident Evil 7, for some reason, you're actually warped to a completely separate room where you are then expected to do the puzzle. Now, why this needs to happen, I'm not entirely certain. I don't really understand why this couldn't all be done in the original room that you set it up in. But for whatever reason that may be, you're actually several feet below the house doing this puzzle instead. So before we go into the area with Mrs. Baker, if we take the camera through the door, you can see what she's doing while she's waiting for Ethan. And, well, I mean, I don't really have any words for this one. So if you're new to the channel, you might need a little bit of an explanation here. Most 3D games have what is called a skybox, which is an image that wraps around the entire world to usually give you either a sky or something to look at when you're looking down a pit. Here in Resident Evil 7 below the house is a very unusual texture. Now, I can't really pinpoint what exactly this is meant for, but throughout your adventure, it rests at the very bottom. Alright, so we just made Mrs. Baker fall down a hole, and she's covered up in bugs now. I never really got this part of the game, but if we take the camera through the pool of bugs, we can actually see that her skin is completely textured in moving bugs as well. Gross! And just to crank up the creepo factor to 10, you can see Mrs. Baker's eyes move around, as well as moving her lips once in a while. What lies deep within the dark, scary tunnel, viewer? Well, I'll tell you what. If we make our way down the hole that Mrs. Baker fell down later on in the game, you can later see a tunnel. And inside the tunnel, you'll find Mrs. Baker. Not content with cranking up her creepiness factor to 10, we are now at stage 12, and the knob is broken. I hope you can all sleep tonight. Here's another gross scene that you might remember where you had to fetch a key. Well, here's what it looks like from inside. Now this is one of the later bosses in the game, and he just kind of pops out of nowhere and surprises everybody, and I kind of wanted to know where he's coming from exactly. Now a little bit to my surprise, he doesn't just suddenly appear. No, actually he starts outside in the swamp, and then shoots over into scene as fast as he can. It's very strange. And of course, one thing we have to take a look at is a full zoom out of the ship. And my god, it is massive. You know, it's funny to think that 21 years ago, players were first introduced to the idea of being terrified in 3D graphics. And now just 7 entries later, we've gone from walking on portraits to scaling highly detailed, massive environments like this. Yeah! Pat's back, people!
Pat's back!
Again, it's been too long, man.
It's been a while.
Yeah, since I had a friend. Not gonna do any plugs this week. I just, I missed Pat, missed having him around, so I just wanted to do an outro with him. So.
I'm your plug, guys.
Yeah. Make sure you follow Pat at patpatpat.patpat.com.
/Pat.
/Pat, right. Of course.
You gotta remember that part. It's pivotal.
But guys, thank you so much for watching Resident Evil 7. I hope you guys enjoyed it. And, you know, more Resident Evil games will come in the future. So if you want to, you can subscribe. Oh, look, I'm doing it anyway, Pat.
Damn it, Derek.
Oh, well. We're past that point now, so you might as well do it.
Well, there's the box.
It's right there. All right, guys. I'll talk to you again later. Bye.